Hi everyone, I'm Bethany and I prefer female pronouns.
Hi everyone, I'm Frasier and I prefer female pronouns as well.
So we will be presenting on LGBTQIA student services. And just sort of, we want to talk about a little bit of context and a little bit of language, just to be specific. So this long acronym stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning or queer, intersex, and ally. And you'll see that there are other acronyms used. You've probably heard LGBT, LGBTQ, and this is the acronym that we've chosen to use for our presentation. And the G and the L are often interchanged, so you'll see that as well. In general, queer is a blanket term. It's a reclaimed word. It used to be a derogatory slur towards homosexual individuals. It has been reclaimed and is now used to encompass all identities on the sexuality spectrum, if you will. And the general purpose of LGBTQIA student services is obviously to serve students who identify within that spectrum.
Yeah, so some common services that GLBTQIA services will provide for students are programs offices, where there are physical spaces and student lounges for students to network with other students on campus. And also in those spaces, there will usually be culturally competent staff who may identify with the GLBTQIA or be deeply connected with that community. There's mentorship programs that are available, some that are more formal, and then some where students can kind of find someone that they can connect with who's either their age or with a staff member that's supportive of their student success and their personal experiences. And then counseling and advising, some of that as well as formal, or it could be just meeting with a staff who works in the programs offices. For some of the institutions that we interviewed at, some of the services weren't actually housed in a GLBTQIA programs office. They didn't have programs offices, which we'll kind of talk about that as being a fairly new service in the functional areas. And then kind of welcoming programs and events to expand knowledgeability about the GLBTQIA community, and then kind of spreading awareness on campus, and also providing students with resources, so classes they can take that might speak to their identity or educate themselves further about LGBTQIA, the community and history and context.
So just a brief historical context. Frasier mentioned that this is sort of a relatively new area, and we want to emphasize that it's new because student affairs is a little bit behind. It's not new in terms of people identifying on this sexuality spectrum. So sort of the landmark, I suppose, event that started the gay rights movement was the Stonewall Uprising, which took place in New York City in 1969. Essentially, patrons at a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn, were beaten by police, and people rioted, and it sort of sparked other movements and brought about, in conjunction with the civil rights movement, women's movement, other movements that were already taking place in the United States, brought about a stronger voice for LGBTQIA in identifying individuals. So, as we mentioned, physical spaces, offices that are geared towards these students are newer, just started forming in the 1990s, and several of the institutions that we looked at do not have those physical spaces. So Student Affairs is still trying to navigate how that is going to look. Some of the challenges in student services in this area are reaching out to students, because identifying those students can be challenging. It's not something that you can tell by looking at someone. It's not something that people walk into a room necessarily and say, hello, I identify here. And so figuring out how to make that more out in the open and allowing students to be better served is an ongoing struggle. Documenting, similar to what I just said, There's a lot of like surveys that people are trying to do, but it's kind of hard to be like, what are you? And the goal is not to ask that question, right? So figuring out how to ask students what their preferences are in an appropriate way.
And I think to add on to Bethany and the CAS standards, there's actually no college or institution that in admissions asks those questions. So again, it's hard to understand or have an idea in terms of those demographics that are present on campus.
And another challenge can be the type of institution, as we will talk about a little bit more. Obviously, if it's a religiously affiliated institution, depending on what that affiliation is, there's some other areas that you need to navigate. So figuring out how to best serve students in accordance with whatever your mission statement might be is an ongoing challenge. So just a little bit more from the CAS standards. I just apologize for like the wordiness of this text, but I wanted you to see some of these quotes. So I'm just going to read them, which I generally don't like. But so the first one is, it is no longer a matter of whether to provide services for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender college students. Rather, it is a matter of when. So again, acknowledging that this is an issue that we have sort of failed to address appropriately, quickly enough, ahead of time, etc. And that's something that we're playing catch up on. I won't read the whole second one, but it's essentially talking about one of the problems with this issue is that homosexuality was previously viewed as a mental illness or a disability, and so thankfully that framework has generally shifted, but again, playing catch up from that, and it's not a part of disability services, or it's not a part of any other. It's its own entity that needs to be serviced. And then, excuse me. So I could talk about this for a long time, so I will try to be brief. But acknowledging that our society is heteronormative, and that the assumption is that you are straight unless you tell me you're not straight, and that higher education plays into that heteronormativity. So after you acknowledge that, figuring out how to sort of break that down
Yes.
as an institution.
Yeah, and so a lot of the people that we interviewed with the campuses that did have programs offices, the staff benefit from those services as well, just having a community on campus that's supportive of the LGBTQ community. The staff are benefiting, and even alumni networks are keeping in close contact to make sure that their changes are coming, or maybe funding or doing whatever they can to support those program offices, or this kind of beginning frameworks to how to maybe address these issues and support the staff as they support the students. Yeah, so we can kind of go through this one a little quickly, but kind of just repeating result of increased student activism. Specifically in Augsburg, it was in the late 90s that the students actually locked themselves into the administrative offices and would not leave until administrative representatives of Augsburg College promised that they would initiate a Lgbtqia programs office. So, and then just kind of various support externally and internally for recent programming. There's also internal tensions within the LGBTQIA community, so maybe like tensions between someone, maybe a man of color, and then maybe a white woman. There's multiple different identities and kind of viewpoints on, is bisexuality a thing? No, it's gay, gay or lesbian. There are those tensions even within that community. So kind of teaching within that internal community, and then external teaching. So teaching people who don't even identify with that community, kind of spreading awareness of inclusion, and that there are different identities even within the LGBTQIA community. So I kind of spoke to this, but even, undocumented immigrants that might identify, or students of color or disabled students face different barriers that must be addressed.
So briefly, we just want to talk about sort of bringing this locally. We're in the Twin Cities, and the Minneapolis is considered one of the safest cities in the United States for LGBTQIA identifying individuals. And as we as this slide mentions, University of Minnesota Twin Cities and McAllister are recognized as top student support services. So that's something, if this is an area you're interested in, I would encourage you to maybe do some informational interviews at those institutions. We'd be happy to. I'm sorry. Oh, that's all in the way.
It's Augsburg, McAllister, U of M.
Yeah, those three.
Yeah.
So we want to stop talking at you for a second and give you a minute to sort of breathe. So if you can just, at your tables, sort of compose a sentence about LGBTQIA services you've experienced at a past institution, learn from what we just said, or already know, or think an area of growth for yourself. Just take like a minute and think about that. Go ahead.
It's a think, pair, share. So I think, yeah, maybe think first and then. So I don't think, I haven't worked at an institution that has a named center. Because when I was at Hamlin, there was a staff member in the Hedgeman Center, which is more kind of generally multiculturalism, but there was a staff member who was hired to focus on these issues for students, but I haven't been anywhere that has a physical space that is.
At Hamlin, they just hired someone recently for this particular area.
You can take like 30 more seconds.
It's just like speaking stages. And I feel like I'm learning a lot, especially about the pronouns. So I guess I didn't know anything about it prior to really starting this focus.
Well, it kind of relates to our functional area as well.
It does, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna bring you back to the large group. Sorry, we know, but
Overflowing.
we wish we had like the full time to let you guys know. But if two or three groups would like to share back what they talked about. Yeah.
Whether through like formal offices or informal student groups, we all experience some form of working with the LGBTQI community and what they advocated for through our college experiences.
I didn't really make up a sentence, but we were talking about how it's really important about how the office is including everyone and what that format and look of the office looks like within the student center, wherever it's located.
Anyone else?
At my undergraduate institution, I don't know if the environment was necessarily the safest based on the students' perceptions, but I think our university did a really good job of supporting the community because we have one of the, at like Mankato State, they always said we had one of the older GLBTQIA centers in Minnesota. And every semester they did a drag show, and it's like the largest event on our campus. Like everybody goes, anybody can participate. I got the chance to participate, and the drag show was a lot of fun. And then they did safe zone training a lot, which I thought was fantastic. I just wish that like it could reach to more people. Those who are open-minded got reached to, but I don't think it reached as many people as it would have.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. That's often sort of the issue is who are we reaching? Is it the students that are already involved going to events? Is it students who aren't? So thank you. We want to transition into talking about our interviews and the institutions that we looked at, which is why we wanted you to start thinking about more institutions. And we will try to be a little more brief in this section because we want this to be a conversation. We want to have time for you to ask questions and comment. So
You have about 6 minutes left of your 20, just so you know.
thank you. That's good. Okay, so here we go.
Okay, so I focused kind of on the University of Minnesota, which is one of the top LGBTQIA friendly campuses according to Huffington Post. It does have a programs office which was created in 1993 and has a unique focus on addressing multi-identities within the LGBTQIA community. that exists. They just had an event, actually. They gave me all kinds of helpful resources, but they just had an event called Tongues Tied United for LGBTQ people of color. And then they also just had kind of a discussion panel that addresses issues that East African men and women or people face in kind of in their cultural communities on campus at the U. Then there are also mentorship programs, diversity and equity trainings. There's a initiative on campus for transgender, I think with the Transgender Commission, and partnering with the management services to initiate gender-neutral bathrooms all across campus. That's going to take a long time, but it is beginnings of the framework. And then also resources located in the office space. And so then I met with Owen Marciano, who's the co-founder of the services office at the U and is board member of Transgender Commission. He spoke a lot about how multi-identity is huge and cultural competence in many different forms of cultural competence, not just within the LGBTQIA community, but greater efforts to understand different cultures that exist, different identities that exist for students coming in for services. And then also talked about how change is really slow too at the University of Minnesota, especially because it's so large and policy is really based within the institution. So funding happens, but it's a lot of it is in the gray area and how they use it. He also spoke to how administrative support plus staff and student voice is what leads to ultimate success. So when you have those layers of cultural competence and understanding and support and knowledge and awareness on all levels, and when you have students who are really motivated, staff who are motivated, and administrators who are motivated and care authentically about these issues, that's when there's a lot of change that can happen. So, and that's when they've kind of experienced opportunities to do things like this on campus. So,
I looked at Gustavus, my previous institution, and Gustavus doesn't have a formal mission statement regarding LGBTQIA services or identity. There's no physical space on campus, but because the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America last year voted to allow homosexual pastors, and Gustavus is religiously affiliated with the ELCA, they're able to sort of more openly address these issues. And it wasn't poor before. Gustavus has a strong Queers and Allies group and a strong sort of liberal-minded student body. But now, the chaplains do a lot of pairings with that, so it's a little bit more out in the open, I suppose. And then I met with Rob Kendrick. This is a terrible photo of him, but
it's a scribbly photo.
It's a scribbly photo, yeah. Just so he looks much better than that. But he's the faculty advisor for the Queers and Allies group, and he was my resource because, again, Gustavus doesn't have an office. And the Diversity Center does a little bit in this area with partnerships, but he actually focuses more. So the mission statement of Queers and Allies, according to Rob, is to include any and every student, provide a safe space for closeted or questioning students, and to educate the campus. And one of the biggest points I wanted to mention about Rob and what he said was, especially being on a rural campus, having a strong group that students can identify with is important because they can't really go anywhere else for that autonomy and for that connection, which I think was an interesting point, considering this is the only rural institution that we looked at.
We have 50 seconds, so I would say maybe we go to questions.
Okay. Well, Augsburg is cool, and so is St. Thomas, and sorry. So questions, we just want you to look at the back of your handout, the last page. And we encourage you to give this a glance and look at your institution where you worked or previously attended and think about where it falls sort of on that grid. And we'd love it if you have comments, questions about that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in your interviews, did you learn anything about any trainings or anything for staff members where you can like ask honest questions to like really understand further some identity issues or challenges?
Yeah, they have, well, at the U, they have diversity and equity allied trainings that they do that you can take. You can take them and get certified, or you can do like one-on-one info sessions with the staff there. So the assistant director and director offer services and welcome people to come in to, you know, if they feel that they're on a lower level of awareness or knowledgeability, they can be more informed.
One question.
This is the next question. I was gonna have a comment.
Okay, is there a question?
Yeah, Megan.
So, I don't know, we were talking about our group about how we had very, like, I think pretty inclusive LGBT experience in undergrad. And I've noticed ever since coming to St. Thomas, like personally, I don't find anything. And I just kind of wonder if in your interview with Byrne or with anyone in St. Thomas, did they mention trying to make that group more out there and visible, or having people in power that are LGBT community, or was there anything like that?
I'll briefly answer that, and then I would be happy to follow up with you and anyone. We're both really passionate about this issue, so please, because we talk too much, if you have more questions, let us know. But yeah, Vern mentioned the struggle with that, right? So we are in connection with the Catholic Church, which does not support homosexuality. And he talked a lot about how the movement at St. Thomas is behind and has started and been focused on allies. So that's sort of the like allowed is kind of not the right word, but version of this service at St. Thomas. But that's changing. Last year the group's name was changed to Queer Straight Alliance, which seems like a small step, but for St. Thomas, having a group that has queer in the name is a pretty significant change. And there is more focus on, there's more focus on creating committees, renaming things, so that his main point was talking about signifiers of inclusion, and how we can do that like as our own individual selves when an institution doesn't formally support. Does that make sense?
Symbol, sign, something on your water bottle that shows that you support as a staff member, that you have
Something
personal
on your door
value.
or something, right? And using word language, pronouns, that kind of thing. Does that help?
Good. Thanks.
Sorry.